Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, telling people today that many of the world's money minds and the Fed will do all it can to safeguard the U.S. economy. Bloomberg's economics editor Mike McKee is in Wyoming, and he has been following the meetings all day long, and he now joins us with a special guest. Mike?
Well, Pimm, thank you very much. I'm here with William White, who chairs the Economic Development and Review Committee at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris. And it's kind of an interesting group because they look at the economies of the member countries around the world and kind of judge what kind of state they're in, which makes you an appropriate person to ask. Now that Ben Bernanke has said, we are prepared to act if necessary, it's going to be necessary.
Well, one certainly hopes that it won't be necessary, but there is no doubt, and I think this was the sentiment this morning, that the world as a whole, but certainly the advanced market economies, are laboring under a big burden, which is the burden of debt, particularly household debt, a burden that's actually being quickly transformed into sovereign debt as well. And that's going to be a drag for quite some considerable time.
Jean-Claude Trichet came out this afternoon in his address and said that you really need to focus on this. Is the priority misplaced in the United States, or is the Fed in a situation where they don't really have a choice?
Well, I'm not sure that Mr. Trichet said that. What I took away from Mr. Trichet's speech was that he really did feel that the case for fiscal tightening relatively quickly, now not tomorrow, but that one should come forward with a credible plan as to what you intended to do to turn an unsustainable situation sustainable. That he thought was terribly important. And I also think it's terribly important in the United States. But we're not seeing as much progress on that front, perhaps, as we would like to see.
At this point, the U.S. expansionary policies are kind of distorting the global economy, aren't they?
Well, I wouldn't say that they're distorting the global economy, but there's certainly one thing that I think we do have to be concerned about, and that if you're worried about these global trade imbalances, which people have been worried about for a long period of time, essentially what it comes down to is that the Americans, in a way, consume too much and produce too little. And in contrast, in China, they're putting far too much onto the investment side, much of which is directed towards exports. So in a certain sense, as both of those two groups of countries try to deal with their domestic problems with more of the same, you can see there's a danger of exacerbating an underlying imbalance, which in the end may come back to haunt us in an even more serious way.
Well, that would suggest that the Fed shouldn't be leaving interest rates too low for too long.
Well, I think there are. Clearly, there are advantages to keeping interest rates low. We know what the rationale is. It's an attempt to try to encourage more demand, and one would hope in particular more investment demand that might contribute to the tradable expansion of tradable goods, etc. So all of that is good, and I don't deny it. The point, however, that I would make is that there is another side to very, very easy money, which is over a longer horizon. Okay, now not tomorrow, but over a longer horizon. Very low interest rates are bound to generate lower savings than you would otherwise have, which is not a good thing. It allows people to borrow money to keep themselves alive, sort of a self-evergreening of high-risk companies through the bond markets. It encourages zombie companies and zombie banks, misallocations of resources. Now, all of these things are medium-term things. And Chairman Bernanke has a clear and pressing present problem. And this I don't deny. My only point would be is that we evaluate what to do going forward, that the framework should encompass both the short-run effects of monetary policy and the medium-term effects of
very easy monetary. So you don't think it's too much of a danger right now? Because some people say the policy that they're following could lead them back into deflation. It creates that situation by eliminating the amount of savings that would normally be in the economy, and by keeping rates so long, you bring down inflation expectations and you set the stage for a deflationary episode.
Well, this is entirely possible. If one thinks that the root cause of deflation is debt, in the sense of Irving Fisher, 1930s, that kind of thing, policies that encourage a greater accumulation of debt, do have that danger. But I think what I'm suggesting here is that the near-term effects of monetary easing are actually in the opposite direction, trying to make the economy more expansionary, which is good. But you're quite right to point out that this is one of the medium-term dangers. So there's a trade-off that people have to make.
Now, you and I have had an interesting discussion about this, but the people on Wall Street who live and die by headlines, do you think they got today from Ben Bernanke what they needed to get? And did he do a good job of dealing with the communications issues that the Fed has had?
I think he's done as good a job as could be done under the circumstances. But look at you, you've got to admit that it is an extraordinarily difficult task. On the one hand, he wants to reassure people that there's still some ammunition here and that if things turn bad, the Fed has got the wherewithal to do something about it. But of course, the more he tries to reassure on that front, the more people say he's saying that there's a greater need to be reassured because there's a problem that the possibility that the economy might turn down. So one way or the other, it's a very, very delicate game that he has to play. And how precisely people will react to it is hard to tell.
Today they reacted well, but next week we'll see. Thank you very much, Bill White from the OECD, for joining us this afternoon.